Creativity is contagious. Pass it on. Albert Einstein. Welcome to Deep Dive Creatives, a podcast that dives into the creative process. If you could take a moment to hit that subscribe or follow button, I would appreciate that, and that will also let you know when the next episode will be posted. Meet Von Glitschka.
I'd never done anything like that, and I said, sure, I can do that. And then as soon as I got off the phone, I just started researching, okay, what do I need to know to do this?
Von is the founder of Glitschka Studios located in the Pacific Northwest. Von works closely with clients from all over the world, collaborating to create and design illustration for global brands, small business, and startups. Von has a passion to pass along his knowledge and expertise to any and everyone willing to improve their creative abilities. He's written numerous resource and how-to books, and his best-selling book, Vector Basic Training, has become an industry-standard teaching resource in art schools and college design programs worldwide. Von shares how that book came into existence.
In 2019, I wrote my best-selling book, Vector Basic Training, and it documents the creative process, how to go from thinking and analog drawing, and then going from that stage to digitally creating the artwork in Adobe Illustrator. I had a publisher after I spoke at a conference for a couple years, asked me to write a book, but they wanted, can you write a book about Adobe Illustrator version whatever? And I go, no. I'm going, that's going to be outdated in a year. I want to do something that's more timeless, and it will help somebody in their own creative process. And they wouldn't listen to me, and I go, look, this is all I'm going to do. If you want me to do it, I'd love to do it. They finally caved. They let me write my book, and it became a bestseller, and it's been published in 7 languages now. It's called Vector Basic Training.
That book is available on Von's website, glitschkastudios.com/VBT. Von also produces creative content for LinkedIn Learning, and also he shares his design and illustrative experience each week through his YouTube channel, People Love Process. So how did this creative journey start for Von? Well, as he tells it, it began with 2 things. A magazine that was first published in 1952, and oddly enough, a bottle of car polish.
Kind of what caught my attention at an early age was a neighborhood kid whose dad subscribed to Mad Magazine. And he gave me a copy of an old Mad Magazine, and I was just like, it just captivated me. All the cartoons, and then I'd read them, and the humor cracked me up too. But even at that time, it was pretty subversive to what normal comic books were. It wasn't Richie Rich or anything like that, but I really loved the artwork. Sergio Aragones, who would always do cartoons in the margins, was really cool. And so that got me drawing, but what really kind of made me understand that this could even potentially become a career was, I don't remember what year it was, but every weekend my dad would wash his car. He had an old Impala, Chevy Impala, and he had bought this new product called Armor All. And so I'm out there, and well, he was talking about it at breakfast, how great it works. And so I went outside and I picked up the bottle, and on the bottle there's this cartoon character of a Viking with the shield up. And I go, well, that's kind of cool artwork. And then it made me think, so somebody can do artwork and it goes on a product. I'm going, and I didn't really take it beyond that, but it made me realize, okay, well, I guess somebody does that for a living. But I didn't even know, I don't even think I understood the term illustration at that point. So it was at that, but I started understanding commercial art. And then In some of the old comic books growing up, they had like art school correspondence course, and it was done by Norman Rockwell, and that caught my attention. And that's when I go, oh, so you can do this for a living.
And so began Vaughn's prolific career as an artist, illustrator, author, and public speaker. His message to the aspiring creatives: don't stop doodling.
I remember parent-teacher conferences and the teacher telling my parents, Vaughn doodles on all of his papers. And it was like always framed as if that was a problem or whatever. And then, fast forward 20 some years, and I have a daughter, and we're going into parent-teacher conference, and the teacher says, well, Savannah seems to be very smart, but she's always doodling on her paper. And I just kind of smiled to myself. And then when we're driving home, I go, I was in the front seat, my daughter was in the back, and I go, Savannah, when your teacher said, you're always drawing in the margins, I go, don't stop doing that. It's like, that's not a bad thing. It's just something they don't understand.
Creativity can often be a very fragile thing. Vaughn is very grateful for individuals who saw fit to encourage him in his creative journey.
Encouraging creativity early on is important, and I'm thankful that my parents always encouraged me, but also I had some teachers that encouraged me too. I remember in middle school, they had these desks that were really smooth, and with a pencil you could draw on them. And so I noticed there was a little battle scene somebody drew on the desk, and so I drew more of the battle scene attacking them and blowing them up, and then I come in the next day, and whoever had responded to that, and this battle started taking over the desk, and I'm sitting there one day just hunched down working on it, drawing, and I see somebody walk up, and I look up, and it's my teacher, and he goes, once the warfare is done, just make sure you clean the desk. And I'm going, all right, cool.
So now in these next few moments, Vaughn will share his definition of creativity. He'll talk about his creative process and what he enjoys most about that process. He'll also talk about how he deals with those creative bumps in the road when you experience dry spells, and how he reacts when his creative efforts fail. Vaughn will also share with you who his mentors were and where he gets his inspiration. And on the flip side of that, he'll talk about what he considers to be threats to creativity. Then he'll end this creative deep dive with a word of inspiration just for you, to encourage you as you venture down the wild path of creativity. Let's dive in.
I'll address creativity in the context of what I do for a living, which is technically commercial art. So it's in context of working with a company who has an existing brand, and they need to reach the audience with whether it's a product or a service they're offering. And I have to help them solve the problem of how best to do that. And sometimes I'm doing that for the agency of record, who it's their client, not really my client, but they hire me to solve that for them. And so I'm given a creative brief that explains who their target audience is. They might have a general idea of what they want, but they specifically are contacting me because, unlike most graphic designers, I do graphic design and illustration, and I usually combine those two disciplines, and not every graphic designer can do that. So they know my niche will fit their needs, and I'll create on their behalf within a defined spectrum of what's appropriate for their clients, But that said, sometimes they have an idea and I'm looking at it, and I've been working this industry long enough where now I'll go, I'm not sure that's how we should do it. I go, what do you think of this? And so I just share with them. I figure I'm part of their team, at least for this project, so I'm going to give them my feedback. And that's led to some really cool kind of projects morphing in a way and going beyond where even they thought it should go. And when you do that, then that's when they see the value in what you do. So I guess creativity for me in a nutshell is being able to problem solve and do it in a way that communicates effectively. When it comes to a creative process, I like to say I have a very systematic one, and the project might be a brand identity, it might be packaging design, or maybe it's iconography for a company already has a brand identity, but they need icons for in-store signage, let's say. So I adapt my style to whatever the need is. But my process of working through ideas is similar for whatever discipline it is. I start off with thinking, taking in all the information, then sketching to work out ideas and think through clever concepts, just to make connections conceptually that'll lead to good ideas. And then afterwards, just executing on those ideas effectively. I mean, there's a lot of designers that can come up with good ideas, but they kind of fall short when they execute on the ideas. And there's some designers that can execute ideas fine, but their ideas aren't that compelling. So it's kind of like you have to do both well. And I almost have more fun working out ideas and coming up with ideas. Of course, I love the whole process, but I get excited when I kind of stumble upon something. I go, oh, this is going to be cool. And so that's always nice. Of course, I do a YouTube channel called People Love Process, and I document the creative process on a wide range of projects there, because much like encouraging kids to pursue creativity, I like sharing the process so other creatives can learn new skills and disciplines that they can apply to their own workflow. My favorite part of the creative process is just being in the bit, like I've done all the research up front, and now I'm really kind of hyper-focused on creating the design. And I have a good general idea of where I'm going, but it's in the midst of that where I realize, oh, you know what, this would look better this way, or just the fact of doing something makes you think of something else that would pair with it or go with it even better. I have to convince myself first. If I'm not excited about something, I don't feel like the client should be excited about it. And sometimes I remember one project, I don't remember what year it was, but I delivered designs and there was none of them that I was really like, I really liked, but the client loved them. And he picked one of them, and I'm going, okay, technically I guess that's a success, but I still feel like I failed. And after I did that one time, I'm going, I don't want to go through that again. I want to make sure that I feel like it's the best work I can do. And then if the client likes it, great. But even if the client doesn't like it, and that's happened before, I know I've done my best work. I'll give you a real world example.
Okay.
And this goes, this is in 2022. I was approached by a powdered nutrient company. They're based out of Portland. And they take beets and they powderized them. And it was started by a former chef who wrote a best-selling book, but then afterwards became a vegan and wanted to find a new way to promote healthy eating. He came up with this powdered beet formula that he developed on his own, and it took off, and he sells a ton of it to the NHL and all this stuff. Well, anyway, his branding wasn't so hot. And so he approached me, and I go, sure, I'll work with you on this. I came up with what I consider one of the best brand identity designs I've ever done. He hated it. He hated everything. I did all kinds of explorations, and none of them, and I came to the point where I realized he just doesn't really know what he wants. And he's waiting until he sees something that he thinks is the right thing. And I was telling him, I go, look, this is it right here, this one. And yeah, he didn't go for that. And I've eventually seen what they came up with. And in food product packaging, things should be appetizing, is what advertising agencies usually sell. His looks like a warmed over copy of the Netflix logo, which, yeah, and it's after something like that happens, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, I'm going, okay, so I develop courses on brand identity and I'm trying to teach other people how to do it well, but yet I have a project like this that goes off the rails. Yeah. And I go, now I feel like a total failure type thing. So I think there's always, or what's the other term people use, imposter syndrome. So I think that's always kind of what creatives deal with in some form or shape all the time. Is we're always, because you can do everything right in the creative process and a client can still decide to go in an opposite direction. There's really nothing you can do. And since COVID, that's happened even more because it's changed the dynamic since a lot of people were working remote, and then they kind of hyper-focused on things more than they used to. And then they started reading into it. I'm going, what? No, why are you even thinking that way? That's not. Yeah. So that's a hard, in my opinion, in the creative process, that's the hardest part for me to try to resolve and work through. There's been many projects where I have one coming up that's kind of intimidating. It hasn't started yet, but I know I'll be able to do it. It's just, it never fails. Things do intimidate me if I haven't done that specific type of thing before. That's always like an unknown. So I think those are always more fearful. But for an example, I believe it was 2019, I was contacted by a local insurance company and they wanted me to design their annual report. And I've never designed an annual report before, but they didn't want a print annual report. A PDF is what they had done up to that point. They wanted it to be interactive. And I'd never done anything like that. And I said, sure, I can do that. And then as soon as I got off the phone, I just started researching, okay, what do I need to know to do this? And I'm going, man, I might have bit off more than I can chew here. But it was a cool learning experience because I learned that there's these services online where as long as the company that hired me to do this would pay for the service, that they had, it was easier to compose something like that. You didn't have to create it from scratch. And I believe that service was called Turtle or something like that. But that was fun because I just never done that before. But once I figured it out, I go, okay, this is, I don't know if I want to become known for doing annual reports, but it was at least, it challenged me. So I like creative challenges, especially if I've never done it before. Then I figure, well, even if I totally bomb on the project, I can at least know what to do better next time. In terms of failing, creatively speaking, I used to get these mailers from an art representative based out of Toronto. And I would look at the samples of the different artists they were showcasing. I go, these are kind of cool. But I realized they didn't have a style like the one I was doing a lot at the time, which was very chunky and graphic. And so I put together a set of examples and mailed it to them to try to get them to be my art rep. And I basically got a thanks but no thanks letter back, is how I would kind of put it. And I was going, okay, well, I thought it looked good, but I guess they didn't. And so I was kind of not feeling so great about that. And I'm going, you know, I don't like wasting my time trying to convince somebody I can do something that I know I can do. You know, I just need the opportunity to be able to do it. And I've always kind of been that way. And then out of the blue, like 2-3 weeks later, I got an email from them and it said, we're still waiting to see the changes on your art. And I'm going, what are they talking about? They said they didn't like it. Well, that was me reading into what they said. They didn't say they didn't like it. They just said, I forget exactly how they explained it. And so I just revised some of the artwork and sent it back in, and then they liked it. And then they became my first art rep I ever had. And I started doing, a lot of editorial work for magazines at that point, and continued to do that up until the time I left to go work at Upper Deck in 1997. So I did you're always going to be rejected. I've been rejected so much. I always default to, if I don't hear back right away from a client after sending them comps, I almost always think, okay, they're not going to like anything. And it's funny because usually that's the case. If they respond right away, then I know they really like it. If they don't, then I know there's some question about it. And I still struggle with that. I still get bummed out when that kind of stuff happens, especially when I think it's some of my strongest work I've created. So growing up, I didn't even realize until late 1990s when I was working at Upper Deck that an illustrator from the 50s was a huge influence on my artwork. And I didn't make the connection until years later, where I put a name to it. And that was the artist Jim Flora, who was an art director for RCA Records. And he designed all their album covers. And if you look at his art, you know he would have been using Adobe Illustrator to do it now, because it fits that aesthetic and style perfectly. But I always loved it. Well, turns out my dad loved big band music, and those were all the album covers that Jim Flora designed. And my dad had those in his LP collection. So I would always pull them out and just look at the art. I never listened to the music. I was just looking at the art on the cover. I just thought it was so cool. And then it was years later I figured out who that actually was. And so that influenced me quite a bit it made me start thinking I need to figure out what style I like to work in. Now, within illustration, you have different opinions about style. You have those who are kind of like Norman Rockwell. One style, that's all you do. Yeah. Well, that's not the case anymore. Most illustrators have a range of styles they like to work in, and they just jump from one to the other and back based off of whatever projects come in, because not every project can utilize the same style. So I do it, I try different styles and work in a variety of styles based off of one, if it's personal artwork, just whatever I want to do. If it's client artwork, what's most appropriate and will work great for their communication. But yeah, so Jim Flora illustration. The designer that inspired me the most was Neville Brody. He's a designer out of the UK. I first saw his digital design using Macromedia freehand back in the day, and I loved how he designed typography, and his aesthetic of graphics made me realize I needed to take what I was doing at the time more serious so that I could figure out an aesthetic and a workflow that worked for me, because I was just doing everything on the fly back then. And then when I really thought about it, I realized, okay, this is a career. I need to take this more seriously. And as soon as I did that, things started to change for me. I left this small agency. I was offered assistant creative director position at Adidas America. And I actually turned it down. And then for a year, I was going, why did I turn it down? And then I ended up moving to California in 1997 to work for Upper Deck, and worked on Major League Baseball, worked on NFL, didn't do any hockey, worked on NBA, and that was fun. That was like a blast. I was used to working fast, and so when I went into this environment where they have 20 some artists in their art department, like they would have a master schedule and you'd have a month to do a line of like 8 card designs. Well, I was getting that done in like a week. Not because I was trying to go fast, it's just that's the way I worked. And I already had kind of my process figured out at that time. And so I was very efficient, and I get stuff done. I go, well, what do I work on? And they go, oh, you're doing baseball, help NBA. And then they're always shoving me into these special projects because of that. And so they had just bought a Babe Ruth bat from Sotheby's for like $25,000. And they were the first company who was going to cut up the bat and put it on cards so people could have a piece of history, was the name of the subset. And they said, we want you to art direct it and design everything. And I'm going, well, wait a minute. If we're getting this Babe Ruth bat and we're going to cut it up, we have to do a photo shoot of the bat to document it. And I want to put that on the back of the card so they know where this piece came from. They see it. Rather than just being a piece of wood, it's like, but what's the context? And they're going, that's a good idea. Let's do that. So we did that. The bat shows up. So it's a bat Babe Ruth hit home runs with, and he had notches in the bat. You look at it, it's by the Louisville Slugger logo burnt into the bat. And so nobody's in my office, and I'm looking around, make sure nobody's looking, and I'm taking swings with that Babe Ruth bat. I go, when am I ever going to be able to do this? That was fun. And then that card came out, and it was it was both controversial because of what they did to the bat, but very popular. And it got them so much good press that the VP of the company gave me one. That never happened with any insert card because there's limited inserts. But he actually gave me one. And so some of the other artists were pissed that I got a copy of the card, and I still have that. It's actually on my shelf right over there. Yeah, that was fun. And then again, they gave me another project, which was signature cuts. So historical signatures, and they wanted me to design one for Babe Ruth. But, well, how do you do that? Babe Ruth's been dead since the late 40s or whenever he died. So how do you do that? Well, they bought canceled checks from the Ruth estate. And so those show up in the mail. It's in a FedEx package, and it's just a stack of checks in a Ziploc bag. And so everybody's coming around my desk, and we're just going through the day in life of Babe Ruth, looking at what he wrote checks for, like a hot dog and a beer, $1.27 or something like that. But the one that stood out to me was one for $383 and some odd cents for the Park City liquor store in New York. And I'm going, wait a minute, this is 19, whatever year it was on the check. And so I jumped on the internet and I go, like, how much is this much money in 1940, whatever, compared to now? And it was like a little over $5,000 if he went into a liquor store and bought all this stuff. And I go, okay, he was having a party, I guess, you know. But yeah, it was that kind of stuff that was a lot of fun at Upper Deck, because you get to see all the memorabilia and interact with it. I would consider a clear and present danger to creativity at the moment is AI. Generative AI specifically. Adobe's all on board with AI, and I just finished developing, I haven't recorded it yet, but I've developed a course on pattern design. Well, Adobe Illustrator has a generative AI text to vector feature where you can just type in a prompt of what you want it to be and hit the pattern button, and it'll create a pattern for you. But in my opinion, AI is the antithesis to creativity. The Copyright Office defines anything copyrightable, whether it's music, a story, visual images, or 3D images like a sculpture, let's say, photographs, all of that has to, in order to get a copyright, it has to be an original form of creative expression created by a human. And they've determined that writing a prompt, it's not a creative form of human expression. It's a machine that's generating it. And so anything generated through AI, you can't copyright it. So why is Adobe supporting it so heavily? Because I think it's because of agencies, because it allows them to do ideation quickly. For the most part, I think they know it's not copyrightable, so they really can't use it as is. Yeah. But I think they use it for their ideation, which in my opinion is like diving into the wading pool, because they're shallow in terms of, they're so literal in terms of the connections it's making, because it's based off of a data set of pre-existing artwork that other artists created, and it just mashes things together. So it's very derivative. And I think if that's why when there's some design programs that consult with me and ask for my opinion on their curriculum and stuff, and I said, well, I'd definitely put in your curriculum prohibition against students using generative AI for any class assignments. Just make it not allowed. and have a distinct process they have to go through where they have to sketch, they have to figure out the ideas, get those approved, then move to the next phase. Because if you don't, then a lot of people are going to create bad habits where they jump to that, and it's not creative. It's creative in the sense that it creates art, but it's not traditionally how art has ever been created at any period of time, let alone now. So, you hear a lot about, some people, like, basically I got uninvited from speaking at a conference because I stood up against AI on LinkedIn. And I said, no, that's wrong-headed. Here's why I don't think it's a valid form of creativity for a professional designer, at least. And now I don't get invited back to that conference anymore, which is fine. I don't care. But I just, there's some that are all in on it, and they just think you're missing out if you're not. And I'm like, am I completely against AI in any context? No. I just wish they would apply it to, like, okay, stick AI in Photoshop so when I do a drop shadow, it doesn't look like the same drop shadow that I had to create 20 years ago. Make it look realistic, or use AI to be integrated into my email so it takes care of all the spam and I don't have to do it. I think creative goals are really important regardless of what kind of art or form of art you create, whether you're an illustrator, designer, maybe you're a photographer, or even a writer. I like doing all those things, by the way, but I don't consider myself a great photographer by any stretch of my imagination, but I still find it fun. But I remember I was talking to a friend of mine who suggested a book to me, and he said, "Do you like reading?" I said, "Oh yeah, I love reading." And then I had forgot about some goals I made back in the 1998 or so, or 1999, where I decided for the next decade I want to read at least 100 books. And I figured, I think I might be able to do that. I wasn't sure. Then I forgot all about my goal. And it wasn't until, I think, 2018 or 19 that I remembered my goal. And then I went and looked it up because I use Audible. And I was at 400 and some books that I've read. And I'm like, okay, I didn't know I'd done that much. But that same year, I wrote a list of things. One was the reading part. One was I wanted to write my own book, but I had no idea what I wanted to do. Another one of them that I wrote on there that I still haven't done, that I still want to do, is I want to do a logo for a Major League Baseball team. Because the only sport that I really get into is baseball. I like the stats, I like the culture, and I would absolutely love to refresh one of the baseball team's brand identity. That'd be on my bucket list. So I think it's important to have goals like that and pursue them. You never know when you're going to have the opportunity. So for a book, I wasn't talking about a novel, but before social media, the How Design Forum had a forum you could go on, and one of their editors for How Books at the time had asked, if you could write any book on anything, what would it be? Just because I had been collecting ideas that I came up with for a book, and I had made a list and I'd write them down so I wouldn't forget them. I just opened that up and copied and pasted it into the forum. And then I get an email and she goes, "Tell me more about this texture book you're talking about." And I said, well, this is just think of a book that showcases the textures that come with the book and how you can use them in design or illustration, but it's also a resource so they can take it and do whatever they want with it. And they're sold. They go, well, let's do it. And so I did my first book in 2006, which was the Crackle, Crumble, and Burn, which is the name of the texture book. And then I ended up doing 2 other books in that same kind of fashion, but with other topics. Instead of textures, we did pattern one. I think that came out in 2009. And then I did an ornament one, which came out 2010, I think. So I think the common denominator over many of the aspects of creativity, again, whether it's photography or sculpture, or you're writing, or you're an illustrator or a creative, or even somebody who shoots film. My favorite director of all time is Alfred Hitchcock. And Hitchcock is probably best known in terms of the director side of things for storyboarding out an entire movie before he actually shot it. Now, they had used drawing to figure out certain things as they go along, but he was the first to do the whole movie in storyboard. And I love that. And I think drawing, whether you want to be an artist or an illustrator, that's not the point, is one of the few skills that kind of transcends a lot of different aspects of it takes on all the modalities for learning in one form. And somebody asked me one time when I said that in a talk I was giving about the creative process, they go, well, how does it do the audio thing? And I go, well, I would guess it's just the physical sound on paper. Well, now you have digital drawing. And there's a lot of people that don't like drawing on glass, so they put a film over it so it sounds like paper and it works like paper. So I think that's where the audio component of the modality comes into it. But it's a supercharger for learning. And it helps you to, this frustrated my wife for years. I do most of my sketches sitting in church. And I'm not really, it's not that I'm not paying attention, it's how I pay attention. I couldn't have explained this back when I worked with Upper Deck and I'd get a review and the creative director would go, well, I wish you'd pay more attention in our creative meetings, because I'd be doodling while he's talking. And I go, but I ask questions and stuff. Well, yeah, you just look like you're not paying attention. Well, it wasn't until years later I read something about drawing and the cognitive benefits of it. And I go, that's what I've been doing all along. And so I think drawing, whether you're a marketing person, whether you're a business person, it helps thinking. It's not about you're creating impeccable art. It's about, it helps you tap into those connecting the dots. And some of my best ideas are just like little doodles I do, and then I'll refine them later. So
that's perfect.
So never stop drawing would be my recommendation.